Hi, my name is Beth Cousin, and this is my reflection over the close reading analysis essay that we did. I automatically called it an analysis because it feels like that's what we were doing, right? Analyzing the text. I know that we are supposed to talk about kind of what stretched us and what implications that has for our students. And I know that there are some questions, some action items that you have in here about the challenges of the research and the achievements of the research and implications that this work has for our teaching. For the challenges of this research process, what I found is that I automatically wanted to jump to finding out what other people's answers were, what other people believed, if they thought the same things I did, if I was on track, instead of just trusting in myself. Um, I know that this is what our students do always. Like they jump to, let me look this up, let me find the answer, and all of this information is right there at the tip of their fingers so that they can find the answer and they don't really have to go through with the process of thinking it through for themselves. And I found that I did the same thing. I second guessed myself. I wasn't sure if I was reading something correctly. I wanted to jump online and check it, and I made myself stop and think through it before I did that because I've done this a long time and I should be able to trust myself in what I'm reading and what I'm doing. And I just found it so interesting that I don't really remember being this afraid of thinking for myself before. I don't necessarily know when it shifted in that way, but I do think that it has shifted for a lot of our students, that they want to make sure that they're right, that it's not enough for them to believe it or think it and have reasoning behind it and being able to support it, but they also want to know that there's somebody else who believes the same thing, thinks the same thing, says the same thing. And I get it now. And one of the implications for teaching is, how do we really combat that or try to get them to really think through something without just jumping to assuming that they need someone to give them the credibility to believe they're right? Why can't they just be right? And I want to find a space in my teaching where I can encourage them that there are lots of different right answers. There are varying shades of right, and that if they can defend something with the text, if it's something that they can really see in their thinking and it's pulled from the text, like obviously it can't just be something out of nowhere, but if they can find something for the reason why they're believing it and it's their view, that it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody else might agree with it entirely, but it doesn't mean that they're wrong. Like they should be able to base their argument in what they're seeing. So I think that that's one of the things that I really want to help my students with because I noticed myself doing it on my own. So that was definitely a challenge for me. An achievement of the research is that once I got into the groove of it, and I started really trusting myself. I started noticing words that were popping up that were repeated phrases and things that I'm like, oh, this has to be a symbol. And I put my brain down to it and thought, what do I think it means based in this text? And so I think like coming into my own, I mean, I haven't written a paper like this in quite a while. So this was something I had to come back to. But in coming back to it, it taught me to really trust the process of rereading and noting down, like writing down the words that I notice and coming back to them and noticing the context they're in and taking another pass through the reading to figure out what I think it means. And so, one of the things I would want to build into my teaching is giving the students this time to really like grapple with the text. Um, yes, you took a couple passes through and I understand you think you're done, but go back to some of where you put the phrases and think about what that phrase means. Think about what um, you could see here that would connect to that phrase. And the rereading really helps you process that. So I think that that's a really important thing. Um, so in teaching close reading, and lit analysis in the past, there have been a lot of times where I don't know if I cover close reading in a way that it really challenges them to look at the text in different lens views. I think that I really kind of stop with the idea of like reader response theory. What are they pulling from it? What are they seeing? Kind of like the big symbols, themes that live on, on the top of the surface. And then we kind of like move on from there. And after doing this, after having to write a lengthy response based on not a lengthy text, I realized the importance of looking at things through more than one lens, taking a rereading through a different idea that I wouldn't have considered before, playing devil's advocate for myself versus having someone do it for me. So I think that in doing that for my students, I obviously can be the devil's advocate and I can prod at different things, but I want the close reading practice for them to be more about the skill of close reading and how can they do this for themselves when we move on to a different text versus do you understand the text? Like, of course, I want them to understand it, but I really think that the skill base here is what we want to focus on. And so, in my teaching of close reading moving into this year, I've already started to think about what are the ways in which I could tweak this, where it could be more so focused on the skill of doing this in the passage than the passage itself. And how could they kind of start to learn to prod for themselves, to look at it in a different light themselves, maybe give them the different lit criticisms and how can you like look at it with this lens, how could you look at it with this lens, which I don't do a lot in class, but on our first night we were together, one of the fellow classmates talked about doing that with her students, and it was really cool how she talked about it. And I think that that's something that I would want to bring in my close reading instruction because I haven't done that enough. As for um, literary analysis is such a hard genre, I think, to teach students because you have to do two things instead of just one. You have to have understood the text at this very intricate level, and then you have to be able to write about it. And they struggle with both of those things. They struggle, how am I understanding it? And then how am I communicating that? And so I really struggle with lit analysis with students because of that, because of like the double work that it requires them for them to do. And I was thinking about that as I was writing because I have written so many papers across my life. The writing of this didn't take as much time as like the thinking through what I wanted to say because I knew kind of like the transitions I should use, the format, the way in which I should phrase things, the way in which it made sense for me to organize an argument, whereas they're still learning those things. So there's such a huge disconnect in their writing versus like them communicating about what they read. So I almost wonder if like to begin lit analysis work, it starts with that close reading, and then from there you have to teach them the skills of close reading, have them really practice those skills, and then have them just like write to think, not there's writing to learn and then there's learning to write, right? So I think like the learning or the writing to learn, where they're just like thinking through all of these things they're noticing in a text and they're doing it on paper, and then from there taking it and shaping and actually doing writing lessons of like how could we organize this communication that would make the most sense to really showcase what it is that you're thinking here, that is your major point. And so those things, I mean, those are all really sophisticated lessons that take time, but I think from doing this and going back to something that I haven't done in a while, which I like nerded out about it because I actually kind of missed it, was something that I used to really love to do. But I think it brought some things to the forefront of my mind about I really need to slow down and teach the skills and the process to students in order for them to be able to start to put these things together on their own, because obviously they're not always going to have someone who's going to guide them through it, and we want them to be independent and we want them to take charge of their own pieces. And so I think really breaking down these skill sets and then teaching them step by step is going to be the way in which to do that. So there's definitely a lot of different things that came to mind and came up when I was doing this, thinking about how I could improve it in my classroom. And I think that like the biggest thing would be that I want to focus more on the skills. And I think I can do that with really identifying like those skills, maybe even in like, this is the order I do them in, and showing them like, this is how I do it. And this is like the first skill, and then having them practice that skill. So really going back to that like workshop model of having like, I'm going to do it and then they're going to do it and I'm going to conference with them and try to work them through it, and like understanding that getting to like a sophisticated literary analysis for them is going to take some work because of how much thinking we're asking them to do in that process. So overall, I learned a lot and I thought a lot about what I would do for my students. And I also got to nerd out a little bit on literary pieces, which I really enjoyed. So this assignment was really great for all of those things. Thank you.